The moment I saw her standing barefoot beside the silver fountain outside the charity luncheon, swaying under the bright afternoon sun with mascara running down her cheeks, I knew something was terribly wrong. She looked like someone who had been laughing too loudly just minutes before, only to suddenly remember a pain she had been trying to bury for years. Cars rolled past the hotel entrance, guests in expensive suits walked around her like she was invisible, and there I was, just a tired company driver holding a set of car keys, realizing that if I ignored her like everyone else, something bad might happen before sunset. I had no idea that helping that girl would put my job, my reputation, and my future in danger. And I had no idea that by driving one drunk stranger home, I was about to step into the private heartbreak of the most powerful man I worked for. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that one good decision can change a life, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries. Sometimes the smallest act of care becomes the turning point someone silently prayed for. My name was Rais Vale, and at 29, I had learned to keep my head down. I worked as a junior logistics coordinator for a luxury real estate company called Veyron Estates, though most days my job was less about coordination and more about doing whatever no one else wanted to do. I delivered documents, handled late-night client calls, arranged vehicles for executives, and smiled politely when people forgot my name. The company was owned by Cash and Drake, a man whose name carried weight in every room he entered. He was sharp, disciplined, cold in the way rich men often become when life teaches them that warmth can be used against them. I had only spoken to him directly 3 times in 2 years, and each time, I had felt like a schoolboy standing before a judge. That afternoon, Veyron Estates was hosting a fundraising luncheon at the Ormont Garden Hotel, a grand place with glass walls, white stone paths, and gardens trimmed so perfectly they looked artificial. The event was for a youth shelter, which sounded noble, but most people inside seemed more interested in being photographed near donation boards than actually talking about children who needed help. I was assigned to manage guest arrivals, coordinate the valet team, and make sure the executive vehicles stayed ready. It was daytime, bright and golden, the kind of day that made everything look cleaner than it really was. By 2 o'clock, the speeches had ended, the plates were being cleared, and guests were drifting outside with sunglasses, perfumes, and polite laughter. That was when I noticed her. She was near the fountain, wearing a pale blue dress that must have looked elegant earlier but now had a wine stain near the hem. Her hair was loose, her face flushed, and she was trying to unlock her phone with trembling fingers. 2 men from the event glanced at her and whispered something, then kept walking. A woman with a designer purse paused long enough to frown, then stepped away as if sadness were contagious. I watched for a few seconds, telling myself it was none of my business. In places like Ormont, people like me survived by not noticing things. But then she stumbled toward the driveway, almost stepping in front of a moving car, and my feet moved before my fear could stop them. I reached her just as the driver slammed his brakes. She turned toward me with glassy eyes and tried to say she was fine, but the words came out broken. Up close, she seemed younger than I first thought, maybe 24 or 25, with the kind of face that looked like it had been taught to smile for cameras even when the heart behind it was collapsing. I asked if someone was coming for her. She laughed softly, not because anything was funny, but because the question hurt. She said everyone always came for her when she looked perfect, but no one ever came when she was falling apart. Then she tried to walk again, and I caught her arm before she could fall. I should have called hotel security. I should have found someone from the guest list. I should have followed the rules, because rules were the only armor a man like me had in a world owned by people like them. But security might have embarrassed her, and the guests were already watching. So I asked for her address. She resisted at first, mumbling that she did not want to go home, that home was just a museum of silence. But when I promised I would only make sure she got there safely, she finally gave me a location in the Old Hill district, where the mansion sat behind iron gates and trees older than most families. I helped her into one of the company cars that had been assigned for post-event transport. I kept the windows slightly open so fresh air could move through. She leaned her head against the seat and stared outside as the sunny city passed by in bright fragments: office towers, flower stalls, children crossing roads in school uniforms, old men sitting under shop awnings. For most of the ride, she said nothing. Then, in a small voice, she asked if I had ever disappointed someone so badly that even their silence felt louder than shouting. I kept my eyes on the road and told her that sometimes people called it disappointment when they were really just afraid of loving someone they could not control. She turned toward me slowly, as if those words had reached some locked room inside her. Her name, she said, was Surya. Surya Drake. My hands tightened on the steering wheel so suddenly the car swerved slightly before I corrected it. Drake. The name struck like cold water. Cashin Drake's daughter. The girl I had just lifted from a public driveway while half drunk, the girl now sitting in the back of a company vehicle, vulnerable and tearful, was the daughter of the man who signed my salary and could erase my career with one phone call. My mind raced through every possible disaster. Someone might have seen me. Someone might accuse me of taking advantage. Someone might twist the story until my kindness looked like ambition or worse. I almost pulled over, but she had already closed her eyes, exhausted, trusting me in a way that made turning back feel cruel. When we reached the estate, the gates opened after I spoke to the guard through the intercom. The mansion stood at the end of a long driveway lined with jacaranda trees, purple flowers scattered across the pavement like pieces of a broken sky. It was beautiful, but there was no warmth in it. Everything looked expensive and untouched. A housekeeper rushed out when she saw Surya, her face filling with worry. I helped Surya out carefully, keeping distance, making sure my hands were visible, respectful. Before she stepped inside, she looked back at me, suddenly more awake, and whispered that I should not tell her father she cried. Not that she drank, not that she nearly fell, not that strangers watched her. Only that she cried. That was what she feared most. That I drove back to the office with my stomach twisted into knots. By the time I parked the car, my shirt was damp with sweat despite the cool air. I told myself nothing would happen. I had done the right thing. But doing the right thing did not always protect people without power. The next morning, I was called to the top floor. The assistant did not explain why. She only said Mr. Drake wanted to see me immediately. Every step toward his office felt like walking toward a verdict. His office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and he stood with his back to me, hands clasped, silent for several seconds before he turned. Cashin Drake did not shout. That made it worse. He asked where I had taken his daughter, why I had not informed security, and what exactly had happened in the car. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard enough to make me feel already guilty. I explained everything from the beginning, careful not to add drama, careful not to mention the things Surya had asked me not to mention. But when he asked if she had been crying, I paused too long. His face changed then, not with anger, but with something more human and more painful. He looked away first. For the first time since I had known him, Cashin Drake seemed less like a powerful man and more like a father who had built an empire but lost the map to his own child. That he dismissed me without saying whether I was fired. For 3 days, nothing happened. Those were the longest 3 days of my life. People in the office whispered. Someone from the luncheon had clearly talked. A photo had circulated privately of me helping Surya toward the car, and in the world of polished reputations, even compassion could look suspicious if photographed from the wrong angle. My manager avoided eye contact. A senior executive told me quietly that I should start looking elsewhere, just in case. I went home each evening to my small apartment above a bakery, sat by the window while daylight faded, and wondered if my mistake had been caring too much in a world that rewarded people for looking away. On the 4th day, Surya appeared at the office. The entire reception area seemed to freeze when she walked in. She looked different, dressed simply in cream trousers and a soft green blouse, no heavy makeup, no performance in her posture. She asked for me by name. My coworkers stared as if I had been hiding a royal secret. I met her in the small conference room near the lobby, where sunlight fell across the table in bright rectangles. She apologized before I could say anything. Not the polished apology of someone raised around public relations, but a real one, full of shame and courage. She said she had heard people were blaming me, and she had come to tell the truth. She told me her mother had died 6 years earlier after a long illness, and the charity luncheon had been held on her mother's birthday. Every year, her father buried himself in work on that date, and every year, Surya pretended she did not care. That afternoon, she had given a speech about hope while feeling completely abandoned. She drank too much because she wanted the room to blur. She said I was the only person who saw her as a human being instead of a problem to hide. I listened, unsure what to do with that kind of honesty. She was not asking me to rescue her. She was asking me to understand that even people in mansions could be lonely enough to disappear in plain sight. By the end of that week, Kashan called me in again. This time, Surya was already in his office. The tension between them filled the room like smoke. He thanked me, stiffly at first, then with more effort, as if gratitude was a language he had not practiced in years. He said I had shown judgment, restraint, and decency. I expected that to be the end. Instead, he offered me a new role helping coordinate the company's youth shelter partnership, the same charity from the luncheon. It was not a promotion born from pity. It was real work, meaningful work, and somehow Surya had convinced him that the company should do more than write checks and pose for photographs. The months that followed changed all of us in ways none of us expected. I began visiting the shelter during the day, organizing deliveries, arranging repairs, connecting volunteers with actual needs instead of decorative charity events. Surya came too, at first quietly, then regularly. She worked with the younger girls, taught art sessions, helped redesign the common room, and listened to stories that made her own pain less lonely. The first time I saw her laugh sincerely was under the shelter's courtyard tree while children painted paper suns and stuck them on the wall. She had paint on her hands and no concern for who might be watching. She looked free. Kashan did not transform overnight. Men like him did not suddenly become soft because life offered them one emotional lesson. But he started showing up. At first, he arrived in a black car and stood awkwardly near the entrance, checking his watch. Then he stayed longer. Then one afternoon, I saw him sitting beside a boy with a broken toy truck, helping fix the wheel with the seriousness of a man negotiating a billion-dollar deal. Surya saw it too. She did not run to him, did not forgive everything in a cinematic instant, but her expression softened. Sometimes healing is not an embrace. Sometimes healing is simply not turning away when someone tries. My own life shifted quietly. I was no longer invisible at work, though not everyone liked that. Some thought I had risen because of favoritism. Some joked that I had become the Drake family's moral project. Their words stung, but not as much as they once would have. The shelter gave me something no title had ever given me: purpose. I had spent years trying to be useful enough to survive. Now, for the first time, I felt useful in a way that mattered. Surya and I became friends slowly, carefully, with boundaries shaped by the strange way we had met. She was still healing. I was still learning that kindness did not have to become attachment to be meaningful. Near the end of summer, the shelter held an outdoor celebration in the afternoon. There were paper lanterns hanging from trees, lemonade tables, children running across the grass, and music playing softly from a speaker near the steps. The sun was warm but gentle, and everything smelled of fresh paint, cut fruit, and new beginnings. Kashan stood before the crowd and spoke about responsibility, not as a businessman, but as a father who had failed in private while succeeding in public. He did not expose Surya's pain or turn their story into a performance. He simply said that sometimes strangers remind us what family should have remembered first. Then he looked at me, and for once, I did not feel small under his gaze. Surya later walked with me through the courtyard where the children's paper suns still decorated the walls. She thanked me again, but this time it was different. It was not for driving her home. It was for not using her weakest moment against her, for not making her pain a story to impress others, for not pretending kindness made me her savior. I told her the truth, that I had been terrified that day, that I almost chose my job over her safety, and that I was not as brave as she thought. She smiled and said maybe courage was not the absence of fear, but choosing not to abandon someone even when fear gave you every excuse. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, because stories like this remind us that compassion still matters. Your support helps this message reach someone who may need to believe in kindness again, and here is my special request. Comment I believe in second chances if you have ever seen one small act of kindness change someone's life. Years later, people would ask me how I got my position at the foundation that grew from that shelter partnership. They expected a business answer, something about opportunity, networking, or strategy. I always told them the truth. It began on a bright afternoon beside a fountain, with a young woman everyone else pretended not to see. It began with fear in my chest, a set of car keys in my hand, and one decision to treat a stranger's pain with dignity. Suraya rebuilt her life, Kashan slowly rebuilt his relationship with his daughter, and I discovered that sometimes the road to your purpose does not look grand at first. Sometimes it looks like driving someone safely home when the world has already decided they are not worth stopping for.